Random House Audio presents Claude and Camille, a novel of Monet, by Stephanie Cowell. Read for you by Christopher Cazenove. Prelude. Giverny, July 1908. Dull, late afternoon light glittered on the hanging copper pots in the kitchen, where the old painter sat with his wine, smoking a cigarette, a letter angrily crumpled on the table in front of him. Through the open window he could hear the sound of a few flies buzzing near one of the flower beds, and the voices of the gardener and his son, who were talking softly as they pushed their wheelbarrow over the paths of the vast garden. He had meant to paint his water-lily pond again, but after the letter had come, he could do nothing. Even now he felt the bitter words rising from the ink. "Why do you write me after all these years, Monet? I still hold you responsible for the death of my sister Camille. There can be no communication between us." Outside the day was ending, smelling of sweet grass and roses. He swallowed the last of his wine and stood suddenly, smoothing the letter and thrusting it in his pocket. "You foolish woman," he said under his breath. "You never understood." Head lowered, he made his way up the stairs to the top floor, under the sloping attic roof, and down the hall to the locked door. He had worked in this small studio briefly when he first moved here years before, and could not remember the last time he had gone inside. Dust lay on the half-used tubes of paint on the table. Palette knives and brushes of every size rested in jars. Rolled canvas and wood for stretchers leaned against a wall. Past the table stood a second door, which opened to a smaller room with another easel and an old blue velvet upholstered armchair. He lowered himself onto the chair, hands on his knees, and looked about him. The room was filled with pictures of Camille. There was one of her embroidering in the garden with a child at her feet, and another of her reading on the grass with her back against a tree, the sun coming through the leaves onto her pale dress. She was as elusive as light. You tried to grasp it, and it moved. You tried to wrap your arms around it, and found it gone. It had been many years since he had found her in the bookshop. He saw himself then, handsome enough, with a dark beard, dark eyes flickering, swaggering a bit. A young man who did not doubt himself for long, and yet who under it all was a little shy. The exact words they spoke to each other that day were lost to him. When he tried to remember, they faded. He recalled clearly, though, the breathless tone of her voice, the bones of her lovely neck, and her long fingers, and that she stammered slightly. There she stood in his first portrait of her, when she was just 19, wearing the green promenade dress with a long train behind her, looking over her shoulder, beautiful, disdainful, as she had appeared nearly half a century before. He rose and lightly touched the canvas. Sometimes he dreamt he held her, that he would turn in bed and she would be there. But she was gone, and he was old, nearly 70. Only cool paint met his fingers. Ma très chère. Darkness started to fall, dimming the paintings. He felt the letter in his pocket. "I loved you so," he said. "I never would have had it turn out as it did. You were with all of us when we began. You gave us courage. These gardens at Giverny are for you, but I'm old, and you're forever young and will never see them. I'll write your sister again at a shop in Paris. She must understand. She must know how it was." Outside, twilight was falling on the gardens, and the water-lilies would be closing for the night. He wiped his eyes and sat for a time to calm himself. Looking around once more, he left the studio and slowly descended the stairs. Part 1. 1857 to 1861. I have so much fire in me and so many plans. I always want the impossible. Take clear water with grass waving at the bottom. It's wonderful to look at, but to try to paint it is enough to make one insane. Claude Monet. In the town of Le Havre, the harbour water changed colour every hour. Sometimes it was bright blue-green, sometimes exhausted grey, and other times a mysterious inky black. Boats creaked against their anchors, from great English ships with towering masts to little shabby fishing boats, wind-worn and piled with soggy nets. The wind always carried the smell of salt and fresh, slippery fish, which spilled out daily on the wet, rough wharf-boards. The ropes were every shade of brown. 17-year-old Claude Monet strolled down the main street in his dark suit and starched lace cuffs, his thick dark hair tucked beneath his jaunty hat and an artist's portfolio under his arm. Pushing open the creaking door of the art supply shop, he called out, "Bonjour, monsieur." Old Gravier limped from the shadows, illuminated by a few oil lamps. "There you are," he exclaimed. "Did you bring more of your work to sell?" Claude dropped the portfolio on the counter and lifted his new caricatures, drawn with huge heads and minuscule twigs of bodies in the popular Parisian style. The old man chuckled, showing his broken tobacco-stained front teeth. "You clever boy," he lisped. "Yes, people will pay well for these. Commissions come in every day for you. Can you go to this address first thing in the morning? The gentleman who lives there is eager to have his caricature made. He's the father of your friend Mark from your Lethe, which hasn't yet let out for today, I believe." "Hasn't it?" Claude replied airily, taking the address and ignoring the subtle inquiry. He turned away to glance out the window and down the street to where ships bobbed in the water, their masts moving back and forth. Someone was coming past the shop and in through the door. Who is it, he thought, a little uneasily. Ah, no one much. Only Eugène Boudin, one of several local painters who haunted the area with an easel weighing down his shoulder, always wearing the same clothes and shapeless brown hat. He was, perhaps, 40. Friends said you could set a firecracker off near him when he was painting and he'd never hear it. As Boudin walked across the floor, nodding pleasantly to them, the closing door created a sudden small wind, which lifted a few sheets of drawing paper from Claude's portfolio. The young man dropped hastily to his knees to retrieve them. "Bonjour, Monet," Boudin said. "Allow me to help." He also stooped to retrieve a paper that had blown against the counter and glanced at it. Stroking his beard, he studied a chalk sketch of boats. "But what have we here?" he asked, surprised. "Is this yours?" "It's mine. Merci," Claude replied stiffly, holding out his hand. "But it's very good indeed. I didn't know you drew seriously." "Oh, I don't draw seriously," Claude replied as he put his drawing away. "I just do it for my amusement between my real work." "Your real work?" "Yes, I intend to be the most famous caricaturist in France." Boudin began to sift through a large wood box of oil paint tubes that Gravier had brought him. He weighed a few in his hand, his face thoughtful. Looking up at Claude again, he said, "So that satisfies you, eh? But come, you've never tried oils or landscapes?" Claude sensed both artist and shopkeeper waiting for his answer. He shrugged. "Landscapes, monsieur, such as you do? Standing outside in all weather to paint? That doesn't interest me." Boudin shook his head. "Look here, then," he said. "Try it once, and you might change your mind. I'm going to paint at dawn tomorrow, and I invite you to come with me. I'll bring an extra easel and supplies. Meet me in front of this shop at 5 in the morning." "It is unreasonable to go anywhere at that hour, monsieur." "It is totally unreasonable." Boudin touched his chosen paint tubes with love and carefully laid money on the counter to pay for them. "Accept it as a challenge, if you like." "Why, of course, monsieur," Claude replied calmly. 5 in the morning, as you say. I don't suppose it's as hard as all that." He walked away more quickly from the shop, glancing toward the wharf where his father's business stood. Not for the world would he go that way. Things were bad between them. It had not always been so. When Claude was young,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?